Hi, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Dave, and this is the High School English Hub. Today we want to talk about prose nonfiction and talk about memoir.
Mr. Giles, we love memoir, and today we're going to look at an excerpt from Trevor Noah's Born a Crime. This is a memoir that our students have really enjoyed. Students and teachers, if you haven't checked out Born a Crime, you want to check this out. Giles, before we dive into memoir, what is a memoir? Can we define this term?
Yeah, memoir is a personal narrative where a person is giving a first-person account with selected moments of their life. So we want to think about those selected moments, and it has a lot of reflection and thoughts and feelings about those experiences.
Yeah, that's right. Just like any text type, memoir has a set of conventions that we'd like to explore. So when we read closely and annotate, we can do that close reading, that analysis and interpretation. So what do you say we take a look at some of those conventions, Mr. Giles? Why don't you start us off?
Good. These are a selection of some of the many conventions that we'll link in the document below. We want to think first about voice. A good memoir is going to have the voice of the author and what the author does to put that voice, whether it's humor or sarcasm and all the things that make us want to keep reading.
Yeah, another convention of memoir, which of course you find in other types of texts as well, is you like to have specific details when writing a memoir, or when you want to look for those details when analyzing a memoir. Of course, we're diving into somebody's life, and to really understand the messages and thematic ideas that the writer wants to embed, we need to include details so we can immerse the reader in the experience.
Yeah, that's right, Andrew. But we also want to think about emotions, thoughts, and feelings. We know that life's full of emotion, and we have all kinds of thoughts. So we want to think about how the author is weaving in those emotions and talking about their own thoughts and feelings.
Yeah, another key convention of memoir is having some clever dialogue. We need to make our characters come alive. We want to fully immerse ourselves in their experience. We want to feel their personalities. We want these characters, these people in our lives to have voice, and we can really show that through some clever dialogue. What's next?
We know memoir is nonfiction. We know memoir is, again, that first-person account, but memoir is also quite literary. So we want to look for the figurative language and some of the rich symbolism, and maybe there's a metaphor woven in. So all those figurative techniques that we see in fiction, we also see in memoir.
Yeah. Lastly, because we're exploring someone's life, some people's lives, we have to make sure that, when we're writing memoirs, when we're reading memoirs, we want to look for that context and background, right? Because typically you'll be immersed in another part of the world, another culture, and we really need to make sure that we can define some of those characteristics of the context and background so our reader can be immersed in the place.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, now we've talked about some conventions. We've defined memoir. Now let's look at a passage from Born a Crime. Born a Crime is a fantastic memoir. If you haven't read it, please, I recommend it. It's about Trevor Noah's experiences growing up in post-apartheid South Africa. He's mixed race. His father was white and of Swiss origin. His mother was a black South African. And as a young man, he was kind of like navigating this identity in South Africa.
Yeah, that's right. Now, this particular excerpt comes from chapter 11, and this is during Trevor's adolescence, and is during his time period in school, and he's desperately trying to fit in. So he starts sort of a side business, Mr. Giles, where he's sort of supplying some of the rich white students. He's in charge of buying lunches for them.
Yeah.
He's sort of the runner, right?
Yeah, he can race to the front of the line and buy all the snacks, and then he's able to skim some money that way.
But he's doing this for the sole purpose of trying to fit in and trying to assimilate, being one of the only kids of mixed race in that school.
Yeah,
what do you say we read this excerpt aloud, and then we'll go ahead and break it down, annotate, and tell you what we noticed looking for memoir conventions. Go ahead, Mr. Giles, start us off.
Here we go. The second we were dismissed from assembly, I would run like a bat out of hell to get to the tuck shop so I could be the first one there. I was always the first in line. I became notorious for being that guy. So much so that people started coming up to me in line. Hey, can you buy this for me? So people started approaching me during assembly. They'd say, hey, I've got 10 rand. If you buy me food, I'll give you 2. That's when I learned time is money. I realized people would pay me to buy their food because I was willing to run for it. I started telling everyone at assembly, place your orders, give me a list of what you want, give me a percentage of what you're going to spend, and I'll buy your food for you.
I was an overnight success. Fat guys were my #1 customers. They loved food but couldn't run. I had all these rich, fat white kids who were like, this is fantastic. My parents spoil me. I've got money, and now I've got a way I can get food without having to work for it. I still get my break. I had so many customers I was turning kids away. I had a rule. I would take 5 orders a day, high bidders only. I'd make so much that I could buy my lunch using other kids' money and keep the lunch money my mom gave me for pocket cash. Then I could afford to catch a bus home instead of walking or save up to buy whatever. Every day I'd take orders. Assembly would end, and I'd make my mad dash and buy everybody's hot dogs and Cokes and muffins. If you paid me extra, you could even tell me where you'd be and I'd deliver it to you.
I found my niche. Since I belonged to no group, I learned to move seamlessly between groups. I floated. I was a chameleon, still a cultural chameleon. I learned how to blend. I could play sports with the jocks. I could talk computers with the nerds. I could jump in the circle and dance with the township kids. I popped around to everyone, working, chatting, telling jokes, making deliveries.
I was like a weed dealer, but of food. The weed guy is always welcome at the party. He's not a part of the circle, but he's invited into the circle temporarily because of what he can offer. That's who I was. Always an outsider. As the outsider, you can retreat into a shell, be anonymous, be invisible. Or you can go the other way. You protect yourself by opening up. You don't ask to be accepted for everything you are, just the one part of yourself that you're willing to share. For me, it was humor. I learned that even though I didn't belong to one group, I could be a part of any group that was laughing. I'd drop in, pass out the snacks, tell a few jokes. I'd perform for them. I'd catch a bit of their conversation, learn more about their group, and then leave. I never outstayed my welcome. I wasn't popular, but I wasn't an outcast. I was everywhere with everybody, and at the same time, I was all by myself. And that comes from Chapter 11 of Trevor Noah's Born a Crime. Mr. Giles, what are your opening impressions of that one? What do you think? What's it make you think about?
Oh, I love how he tells the story. I love how he's reflecting on who he was as a young man. You can see the reflection. You can see also just him really thinking about his role in this school.
Yeah, trying to fit in. I love that call, the chameleon. Would you say we set up some annotation and we can talk to our viewers about kind of what we notice and try to detect those authorial choices? Of course, we have rich ideas down the left side. We have the passage for annotation in the middle, and we like to put our authorial choices on the right. Mr. Giles, let's look at that first paragraph and tell me, what do you see as you look at that first paragraph? What's worth talking about?
Yeah, I think, first of all, it's all about his identity and fitting in. He wants to be, he's notorious for being that guy. So I think that's, again, like how he wants to kind of stand out from the crowd and fit in. Also notice, in terms of authorial choices, he's using that kind of informal language throughout the whole text, and that colloquial informal language stands out to me.
Yeah, I like that as well. We see that entrepreneurial spirit that he has. We like that as well. We do see the dialogue as well. And in this case, Mr. Giles, is sort of the dialogue of the white kids who are approaching Trevor, and they're asking him to do the buying for him. So I think that entrepreneurial spirit is coming out through the dialogue.
Yeah, that's right. And again, we see this idea of that time is money kind of like expression or cliche that he's learning. And I think this is an important lesson in the text that he's learning how to leverage that.
Yeah, I really like sort of that short declarative sentence to start the second paragraph. I was an overnight success. This actually it taps into his success and popularity, but it's also unusual for this text because Trevor's not really having a lot of successful moments in the memoir as a whole. Mm-hmm. So this is a moment where this does stand out. And I think that short sentence sort of in the first sentence position really sets up the success. It really draws the reader's attention to that. We haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, and the tone is confident and proud, and he's thinking about that. It's also very humorous. He's talking about the fat kids that kind of maybe couldn't run as fast, and he's kind of reflecting on how he was able to manipulate that. That's important.
Yeah, toward the bottom, Mr. Giles, we think about the fitting in and assimilation. We see a really important metaphor. Trevor Noah compares himself to a chameleon. Can you talk about that a little bit, that important metaphor?
Yeah, I love that. We think of chameleons, again, as animals that are able to adapt to their surroundings. So it's a kind of a perfect metaphor, and even the cultural communion and the chameleon and the kind of alliteration of that. And I think this is something that really stands out to the reader because it shows his ability to adapt to a situation. And that kind of runs throughout the whole memoir.
Yeah. And then we think about, as he's fitting in and beginning to assimilate, his images and his reputation is actually, he's going up in status in the school. He's becoming somebody. But then he uses a simile, Mr. Giles, that compares himself to a weed dealer, which is kind of an unfavorable simile. Can you talk about what he's kind of noticing about his quote-unquote fitting in?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's kind of an analogy, and yeah, you're right. It's that simile, like comparing himself to a weed dealer is someone, a weed dealer is someone who's like peddling marijuana. They're not a part of the friend group.
No, you might want them around in case you want to buy something, but they're not a friend, Mr. Giles. No. And they have questionable aspects of their personality, but they're kind of needed. And I think that's what Trevor's doing here. He's saying, like, yeah, I'm fitting in, but I'm not truly wanted in this case.
Always an outsider.
Short syntax, between dialogue, between longer sentences. I think that's a clever use of short syntax to emphasize that he's always an outsider. Mr. Giles, kind of how does this passage come to a close?
Well, I think he's saying, uses this kind of like hyperbole of I was everywhere with everybody because he's able to do everything for everybody.
But at the same time, you have that rich contrast because even though he's with everybody and he can be everywhere, he actually feels all alone by himself. And I think that's a really telling aspect of the passage because as Trevor reflects, as you do in Memoir, he realizes that although he was trying to be a chameleon, although he was trying to fit in, although he was trying to assimilate, actually, he was still isolated. And I think that's kind of the main message. All memoirs have a thematic message. And I think that's what he wants us to take away here.
I like that. So we hope that this gave you an idea of A, what memoir is, but also just an experience of like reading a rich memoir passage and also thinking about how to annotate and make meaning of that. Our next video, we're going to talk about how to take some of these rich ideas and turn it into a short piece of writing.
So make sure you come on back for the second video and we'll hopefully give you some progress with your writing. Stick with us. We'll see you next video. Thanks for watching and see you next time.
Thanks, guys.